So the sport of rock climbing is something that scares a lot of people. It creates a lot of fear. And after 5 years of being a competitive rock climber, I've learned there's 2 ways that you can react to fear. And if you actually use the word fear as an acronym, F-E-A-R, you can understand how both the reactions work. The first, the easier, the more common of the 2 reactions, just says forget everything and run. It's what most of us do when we see something that we're scared of. And fear is actually not a negative thing if you look at it from an evolutionary standpoint. Fear is what keeps you alive. You're afraid of a wild lion because it can kill you. It makes sense. But fear, if you let it dominate your life, just creates a whole timeline of regrets and things you wish you could have done. And so the second acronym says face everything and rise. And that's what I've done with rock climbing. And the most scared I've ever been in my entire life are 2 times that both come from rock climbing. And I went both opposite paths when I chose to do these things. The first I'm going to talk about was the national championships in Colorado Springs about a year ago. I was terrified. I went out in the previous year, I'd come in 12th, and I had expectations of doing better, or at least just as well as I went out and had done the year before. And so I went to this national championships, and I had made a lot of new friends the year before that were strong, and these kids were on the U.S. team. They were competing in international events. So I went out, and I was stoked, and I went in a climbing competition like I was in. You get 4 climbs, and you're tasked with trying to complete every single one of them. And I went out, and I stood before the first boulder, and I was like, I have to get this. And I didn't do it. And then my head started to go, and I started to think. I was like, oh man, what if I don't qualify for semifinals, which is the top 16? What are these other people going to think? What are they going to look at me? I trained as hard as I could for these championships. It's not going to show. And that's what I let dominate the entire round of competition when I was there. When I think about that national championships, I don't remember what the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th rock climb were like because I was so worried about what I didn't even know was going to happen. I threw a little tantrum, I walked out of the venue, and I came back in, and that's exactly how I did. My fears were realized. I would finish in 27th place, and I didn't do as well. But what I realized was it wasn't how I reacted on the outside. But what I realized was I needed to change inside to show what I could do. And it wasn't how I did this competition that mattered to other people. I placed 27th. That's not something that people were going to look at me and go, oh, right, it's 27th. It's good. And so that was my main fear when I was out on the wall. I was like, oh, I'm going to lose all these friends I made the year before. So I went to a training camp in Boulder, Colorado, which is the most terrified I've ever been in my entire life. I was 14 years old. I showed up at this training camp at 6:30 a.m. in Movement Climbing Gym in Boulder, Colorado, which is the climbing mecca of the United States. I was 14 years old. I didn't really have a whole lot of climbing experience. And so I sat down in the meeting room when we were all meeting, and I looked around the table, and I was stunned. I was just, oh my gosh. Because I looked around the table, and 5 people in that room had won national championships, and 7 of them had competed in a finals at a national level event, meaning that they placed the top 10 in the country, and most of them had competed in international level events. And I had just placed 27th. So I was like, oh man, I don't know any of these kids. I'm terrified, because they all knew each other. And I was the one outsider, because the coach, there were 2 coaches at that training camp. One of them was my coach, Chris Peters, and he invited me to come and do his training camp. And so I showed up, like I said, and the first day, it was awful. I was terrified. I looked around. I was super insecure about what I was doing. And I wasn't focusing on rock climbing. I was focusing on other people. And I had ruined the entire first day of this 9-day training camp because I was so worried about what other people were doing, not even what I was doing. So I went home to Chris's house, and I sat on his couch the next day, and that night, not the next day. And I created a list of reasons why I could attend this training camp. And I thought to myself, why I can't do this doesn't matter. Because that's not going to help me do what I'm trying to do. Because this is the strongest group of people I'm ever going to be around. This is the best place to do it in Boulder, Colorado, which is an awesome city. And one of the best climbing gyms in the country, and I'm going to waste it being scared of what other people think I'm doing? No. That's not how I'm going to try and live my day. Live the rest of that week. And so I wrote reasons why I can't, and I just tore it up. I said, whatever. I don't need this list of why I can't, because that's only holding me back, so I'm going to focus on why I can. And what I realized that I could handle was I could change how I reacted to things that were presented to me. There were workouts that I had never even dreamed of doing. I couldn't walk after a day after that training camp. I was just not anywhere near the ability that these other kids were. They could run faster, they could climb harder, and be funnier and just were cooler than I was. All I had done before that was read the Harry Potter series 7 times. That's actually what it says if you look on the web. And so what I also realized was that these really strong people were the coolest group of people I'd ever been around. And not a single one of them cared how strong I was in terms of rock climbing. They only cared how I reacted to those workouts. And what I did was I worked harder than every single one of them, or at least I thought I did. You know, 14 years old. I went out and I found one person that I knew I could work out with really, really well, and it was my friend Dominic LaBarge, who I was the most intimidated by any person I've ever met in my entire life. Dominic is taller than I am, more muscular. I've been told he's more attractive than I am. He has this giant red streak in his hair, and I thought he was going to be the biggest jerk I'd ever met in my entire life. He has a red streak in his hair. Dominic does. Dominic is awesome. And he saw that I was kind of scared, and so one night he was staying with all the people from Texas at that training camp. And he came and stayed with me at my coach's house and kind of talked me through what I could do for the rest of that training camp. And it was one of the most meaningful experiences was Dominic going out of his way, seeing my fear and understanding that I could handle what was given before me. And so when I found myself in the national championships again this year, I thought back to what had happened to me at that training camp. Man, I'm really worried about how I do this national championships because the year before I had done awful. But you know what? Why I can't do this doesn't matter. I'm just going to focus on why I can. Create another list. Why I can. Yeah, maybe I'm not very good at doing very tight compression style boulder problems and rock climbs where you're not ripped in. But whatever. I'm really good at big gymnastic movements. So and I qualified for the semifinal round with that same thought process. So I was super stoked. I was going into the semifinals in 13th place. 1 out of what I'd done the year before. Super good. And then I found myself in semifinals. The first boulder was, as fate would have it, a compression style boulder problem. Just what I wanted. You know what? I have 2 weaknesses. I have weakness of being very bad at compression boulder problems, and then one where I have to climb with really small holes. Only 1 boulder out of 3 instead of 4. There's 3 in semifinals. But whatever. The next 2, I got this. And I went and I looked at the second boulder problem, and it was big moves on small holes. Exactly what I didn't want. And on the second boulder, I had an awful time. I'm not going to lie to you. I was scared of not qualifying for the next round. And then, it's not a thing that just stops. Fear doesn't stop. You need to learn and work and work and work to stop fearing your fear. Because if you're fearing your fear, then you're not going to do anything big. You're just going to be scared. You're going to sit in a room and you're going to read Harry Potter. There's on the pamphlet it says, under my favorite quote, that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. It's a quote from FDR. I was, taken out of the hall today and said, hey, what's your favorite quote? And I was like, this is what I thought of. This is supposed to be speech. But that quote actually means a lot to me. I have 31 pages of quotes in my attic where I have a climbing wall. I've actually highlighted that one in a document that I have on my computer. And I highlighted that one, and the second, it says, feel the fear and do it anyway. That may not mean a lot, but if you look at it from the standpoint of, if I'm scared of everything I'm going to do, I'm just going to regret not doing things. And so, about, I don't know how long ago it was, but I was texted on a Monday night at about 9 p.m. said, hey, you want to do this TED Talk? I was like, oh, man. That's like 100 people, dude. That's a lot of people. And I was like, wait, videos I've seen of people doing that are really cool. And I really want to do that because that'd be an awesome thing to do. I shouldn't be so scared. I'm mortified of being up here. If you don't believe me, I'm wearing 2 pairs of Lucky socks. I'm not kidding. So, I'm up here, and and I was in isolation right before this, and they put me in a room. Went out, and if you don't focus on what you can't do, just focus on what you can do. You're going to do things you didn't even think you could do. Which is what I'm doing right now. So, feel the fear and do it anyway. Thank you.